Hello and welcome all the Web3 enthusiasts. This is Max speaking, and today I'm excited to host an interview with Michael Kang, CEO of Sonic. So I have a bunch of questions prepared as usually, and today's discussion will be for sure insightful and interesting for literally everyone. So to begin with, let's address to Michael. Michael, how are you today?
Hey Max, going well. Yeah. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. So I see you in a good mood, and that's actually perfect. So let's start this interview going. And one of the first questions which came to my mind while preparing for this interview. So after operating for close to 5 years, Fantom officially becomes Sonic. What changes does it bring technically and ideologically?
Um, so um, on the technical side, one of the big motivations for launching the new chain was being able to launch a whole bunch of newer technology that was just easier to launch with a new chain. So the analogy I like to use is, you know, if you're changing an aircraft that's like mid-flight, that's a lot more difficult than just like building a new aircraft down on the ground and then launching that. So there were a whole bunch of like technical changes that we wanted to make that were quite difficult to make with the existing network. So for example, like changes to the database that require you to kind of like relaunch like the structure of the data or to like relaunch the way that you're like storing the data. So there were like a whole bunch of like different technical reasons why we wanted to launch the new chain. And on the ideological side, it's not really like ideology per se. It was more just about like what was like practical, right? So, I talked about the technical motivation, but there's also like a marketing motivation as well. So for example, like we wanted to do like a rebrand of the network from Fantom to Sonic. Big motivation there was a few reasons. One is that Fantom is a brand that's been around since 2018. It's been around for over 6 years. We wanted to do kind of like a bit of a refresh. Secondly, the history of Fantom has kind of been both like positive and negative in different ways. And again, like we wanted to basically like look towards the future rather than the past. And a third reason is that we wanted to just kind of like differentiate ourselves as well compared to like our competitors that are out there. So, with a different name, with a different colors, and it just seemed to be like very natural to want to launch like a new brand along with the new chain itself, given that we wanted to launch the new chain because of those technical motivation and motivating factors, as I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Thank you. Pretty much detailed and at the same time easy to understand. So let's move on. And the next question is, what are the trade-offs to achieve the finality of 1 second on Sonic? Are there any?
The trade-offs generally like relate to the number of nodes in the network, right? So if we, currently there are about 60 or so nodes participating in consensus on the Fantom network. If we wanted to like up that to say like thousands of nodes, then you would have like a lot of difficulty in being able to achieve like a 1 second finality. That being said, we could probably still achieve 1 second finality, in particular with the new technology and a new consensus and method that we're creating for next year. We could still probably achieve that with a couple of hundred nodes. But there is more of a trade-off in the number of like messages or communication that you need to do for consensus when you get more and more nodes on the network. So that is like generally the trade-off. But in on the whole, I think like what we call asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance or being able to process multiple transactions simultaneously is a distinct advantage over traditional like consensus mechanisms that basically confirm one transaction or one group of transactions in a block at a time. Because like the analogy I like to use there as well is that, if everyone's just like in a single queue to board a train and then the train takes off, that's obviously a lot slower than if you have like multiple entry points in order to board the train where multiple people simultaneously can enter the train. That's just like a faster boarding mechanism. And it's similar sort of like here with um our technology compared to like traditional technology, in that, you know, if you can process 3 or 4 or 5 blocks simultaneously on the network and get the final order of transactions in the end, well, that's obviously not faster than being able to confirm 1 block at a time, just like, you know, intuitively, right? So on the whole, I think that in general, you know, it's an optimization to have this asynchronous technology. It's an optimization to be able to confirm multiple blocks at the same time. And that means that you get lower finality. That means that everything gets, on average, gets confirmed faster than if you're doing things one at a time.
Oh, I see. Thanks for using these analogies. For me, it's very helpful. Let's discuss a little bit more about staking and nodes. Please tell us more about staking. We heard its entry barrier is far more affordable than that one on Ethereum.
Yeah, so in order to stake on the new network, it's very similar to staking on the current Fantom network. So what that means is that if you want to like launch, there's two basically ways of staking, right? It's launching your own node, or it's delegating to an existing node. So it's all purely based on the idea of proof of stake. So if you're running your own node, you basically need to set aside at least minimum 50,000 FTM tokens. You follow the instructions for launching your validator node, and then you stake that with the minimum 50,000 FTM, and people can delegate up to about 15 times how much you've staked yourself, right? If you're delegating, which is probably the easier option, and what like the vast majority of people do, what you do is that you can go to the wallet interface. So it's called F Wallet, and it'll be called My Sonic on the new Sonic network. And you basically just go to the staking page, you select the validator, you can just follow the graphical interface in order for you to be able to like stake your token, or basically delegate your token to a specific validator. And when you do that, you still have full control of your assets. So the validator can't touch your money, they can't steal it or do anything like that. You have full control, and you can you know, decide when you want to unstake. When you want to unstake, you can decide like how much. You can just you can collect your rewards basically per block or per epoch. But there are like a few differences with staking for the new Sonic network compared to the FTM network, and that has to do with the way that rewards are distributed. So for the FTM network at the moment, we have this like scaling factor where the longer that you stake your tokens, or you lock it up for, from 2 weeks to a year, you get a higher yield. We figured out that that's quite complicated. It didn't really add any benefit to the network having it structured like that, and it also made it more difficult to get liquid staking token providers on the network, or LSTs. And that's one primary reason why we don't really have many LSTs on the network. And LSTs are important because it allows someone to stake their tokens while also being able to use the liquidity from the stake tokens to basically you know, do DeFi activity. So for the new network, we basically just have one simple staking mechanism, one flat rate. Currently, the plan is you look it up for 14 days, or it takes 14 days to withdraw your tokens, but everyone earns the same one rate. So it's a lot more simple staking mechanism than we had in the past.
Okay, thank you. So sounds like a lot of information, but everything seems clear. That's just wow. Thank you. The next question, actually, I think it's gonna make you smile. It's a little bit of far from technical part. So the CTO of Sonic Labs is Andre Cronje, the famous father of DeFi. How does his test in prod philosophy affect Sonic?
Well, you know, the test in prod comment that he made was always like a little bit of tongue in cheek, but it is like sort of true, right? In that you can test and test and test when you're not in production, but in the end, you know, everyone tests in production because that's like the real deal, right? That's where like the stuff happens. That's when you're actually launching and you have like real people using your product. So our philosophy is that the reason why, a big reason why, like, you know, the new Sonic network has not launched by now, or even months ago, isn't necessarily because it's still under development. It's because we're testing a lot, because there's a lot at stake here, obviously. if we don't want something going wrong with the network, whether it's something failing with consensus or failing with part of the infrastructure where transactions can't be confirmed, or the network going offline, etc. So there's just been like a lot of testing going on internally. We have our own like testing team. We have our own like testing suite or benchmark of tests that we have. We have multiple teams reviewing each other's work. So there's a lot of testing that's going in for the new network before it launches and for the new bridge that we're creating, or the Sonic Gateway. And so in the end, when we plan to launch the new network before the end of the year, we will be testing in production like everyone else, but it's not so much that we're not doing any testing and then we're just going to do all the testing in production. But ultimately, how things work out is when you push something to the real world. That being said, there's been a lot of testing before we actually do get to production, which is why things take some time. A lot of software, I think people who are not software developers don't necessarily realize that a lot of the work related to software development isn't necessarily building the system or the code itself. It's about reviewing and testing the code, which is a huge part of it. With major like software organizations out there, I think like the testing team or the people who are testing are a substantial part of that organization. So yeah, there's just a lot of testing going on, and but ultimately everyone is testing in production.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like everything is being tested pretty well. Uh, okay, going back to our technical questions. Sonic is tapping into unsecured loans with unchained credit scores. What mechanism will Sonic implement to prevent defaults on loans and to collect the loans back?
So we aren't necessarily like implementing that sort of like project or that sort of like application. I know it is an idea that like Andre has explored and talked about a lot. There are a number of projects originating from Andre, or ideas from Andre, that we are planning to launch with the new network, with new teams, or with teams from the community, or having them run by other developers, not ourselves. So that is one of the ideas that may be implemented, but it's not something that necessarily will be implemented. But the idea there, and it's actually a question that's probably like easier for Andre to answer myself, is that there is a company or a project we're setting up called Blockchain Bureau. And in that project, as Andre's like previously talked about, it's about being able to analyze the history of a particular wallet. So there's a lot of detail that goes into like analyzing a wallet, who it's interacted with, what his past behavior has been, and say, for example, lending and borrowing, who controls the wallet, etc. So there's risk analysis there in terms of the performance of the wallet, and in terms of a general like AMO, or know your customer, like checking systems. So Andre's idea is that, like in the real world, if you have like if you're going to assign a credit score to a particular individual, then that is a proxy as to like what is the level of risk that they're going to default on, say like a mortgage or any loan that they take out. So the idea is similarly for either unsecured loans or not like completely backed loans, is that you'll be able to like analyze the wallet, the performance of the wallet, and determine a level of risk. And ultimately, the level of risk of lending to that person will be really up to the lender themselves, right? So if the lender themselves think that it's like too risky, they're not going to lend. Obviously, they think that the risk is acceptable, then they may decide to lend. So that's like the general idea, at least in my understanding of what Andre was talking about.
Okay, I get it. So the general idea seems to be more or less clear. Uh, Now a few questions about like aims, goals, trends, forecasts, even teasers maybe. So what are the new trends Sonic pursues in public chains and DeFi?
So I think like in general, we need to play to our strengths for the new network. and just in general for the Sonic project. So what I mean by our strengths, well, I think clearly like what our strength has been in the past with Fantom, say a few years ago, is DeFi, right? And there's a number of reasons why. Big reason why is that Fantom originally got very, very popular as a chain back in early 21, because there were a number of DeFi protocols that launched on the new network back then, where there weren't really like many protocols to begin with. So there were two like main protocols that launched back in 21 called SpookySwap and SpiritSwap, and they were basically forks of Uniswap and PancakeSwap, and then those got really popular, and then other DeFi applications came to the network, and so Fantom was always known as getting really popular thanks to DeFi protocols. Second big reason is that as we've just been talking about, Andre Cronje's involvement. So Andre Cronje is, if you look him up on Google, he is like called the quote unquote DeFi god. He, is a pioneer in the space, right? He's one of the major contributors to DeFi, going back from the very beginning of DeFi. I remember back in beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic, he was like sharing me ideas related to called Iron, right? Where basically you would like, deposit like your stable coins or a number of assets and you get a yield from it, right? And Iron, later became Yearn, right? And it's launched a whole bunch of different primitives, Solidity, V, Free, other models as well that, a lot of people are now using and basically forking this code, sometimes attributing him correctly, other times not. It's important to mention. But he's kind of billions of dollars of value there, and so he's a title according to community of the DeFi god is definitely like well deserved, and that sort of branding, him being involved in Sonic obviously like comes to us as well. So I think for those two primary reasons, like a big strength for ours is going to be DeFi going forward, and so. Most of the, not all though, but most of the grants that we're giving out to projects that are coming to Sonic are mainly related to DeFi. So I think if we play to our strengths there, not to say that we exclude like NFTs or gaming or other things, because the technology is generalized and can be applied to any sort of application that someone wants to build. But in terms of like branding, I think like DeFi is probably the most powerful for us just based on our history.
Yeah, sounds more than logically. Okay, let's move on. So please tell us about Sonic's post-launch roadmap. We heard you aim to mainnet release in December, and it's not much time left. What's next?
Yeah, so as we've said like multiple times publicly, our intention is to launch the new Sonic network before the end of the year. We want to launch that, and we want to launch not just a new network, but also something that we call the Sonic Gateway or the Sonic Bridge, which is basically our own way of being able to bridge from beginning from Ethereum to Sonic and then later other chains. And the motivation for launching this new bridge is, we wanted to create something that was like more decentralized, more secure than other bridge solutions out there. So the people that will be validating, or the validators that will be confirming the transaction of the bridge will be initially the same as those confirming on the new network. It has a fail-safe mechanism such that if in the unlikely event that the bridge were to go down and or the Sonic network were to go down, you'd still be able to retrieve the assets on the original chain, because when you bridge your asset from Ethereum to Sonic, you're generating a receipt which proves that you bridged a certain asset there, and that's redeemable. So that's what we plan to launch before the end of the year. The timing is going really well. Currently, we've got 3 audits being undertaken for the new Sonic Gateway. There's a lot more testing being done for what we call the client or the new chain itself. That's going extremely well. So far, we're on track. Again, as I mentioned before, we're doing a lot of testing. But another thing I also want to mention is very important is that we're also testing with the community. So we launched a new testnet for the Sonic network. We have a team there that has built a series of games related to the new testnet in order to test out the performance of the network and show people like how good it is. And already organically, we've had I think almost 250,000 different wallets to be created playing games. And we've been able to get, 150 TPS purely from the community. So not ourselves, doing testing on the network, not ourselves, submitting random transactions to one another and being theoretical about it, but actually like having real people, use applications on the network and to submit transactions on it. And already we've been able to demonstrate that at 150 TPS, which is far more than other chains out there, we're still able to maintain, a low confirmation time of under a second, and everything is just really fast and snappy. So, we've already been able to demonstrate in part the success of the technology, and that can scale up to beyond 2,000 smart contract based transactions per second. So we're only using part of the capacity for the network, and already hundreds of thousands of people have been able to use the Sonic technology in testnet form. So that's what's happening at the moment. Beyond that, we have a lot of plans for next year. We're going to be implementing early on ideas around dynamic fees. So that is allowing people or developers to set fees at a gas level for each of their smart contracts that they deploy. So this is something that's very unique that Andre came up, and there'll be a lot of there'll be a lot of discussion and releases about this idea that Andre came up with. We'll be implementing what we call gas monetization or fee monetization. So based on the YouTube model, where as a developer, you can get paid up to 90% of the transaction fees that your application generates. And that's really good positioning for us because, as Andre posted about, the app chain thesis that where applications are building their own chain to capture all of their fees, we think that's not very smart because yes, if you create your own chain and you capture all the transaction fees, yes, that's a benefit, but there's a huge cost to it as well in terms of all this infrastructure, in terms of like you having to worry about your own chain, in terms of all the time and effort that goes into it and the security risks as well. Whereas like for us, we've already built this amazing technology that we want to scale up for applications. And so if you want an application that wants to, make money, not just from the product itself, but also the fees that it generates in terms of transaction fees from users, you can come to Sonic. You can get up to 90% of that going to you. And that's a huge benefit because you capture all those fees that otherwise you're not able to capture on other networks or L2s. And you don't have to worry about setting up your own network. So that's a big narrative that we're driving right now and into the future. And more technically speaking, we also, as I alluded to before, are building a new consensus engine. So we're going to be replacing our existing consensus model that will be a lot faster, even faster than it is currently. It's just a lot more efficient, and it will have a number of mathematical proofs to prove that it has certain properties. So we will be implementing like this new consensus engine sometime next year. Don't really have a specific timeline there because it's still under development, but I assume probably around like Q3 or so at this point in time, I believe. And that will be a huge benefit to the network, and we'll just dramatically scale it up even more than we have at the moment. And then there's just a whole bunch of other technical changes as well related to the database and the virtual machine and a few other things. But yeah, there's already a big plan that we have for next year.
Well, sounds awesome. Glad to hear that everything goes smooth, and I do hope that there are a lot of developers watching us right now, and I hope that they will find what you say really motivating. Me personally, a developer, I would address to you as soon as possible for sure. It's okay. Now time for some forecasts or maybe teasers. Where do you see Sonic in the upcoming 5 years?
I want to see Sonic as being a very, very big chain. I believe that in the longer term, over the next few years, there won't be as many different chains that are out there, whether they be so-called layer ones or layer twos, but there will be a few, right? I don't think it really makes sense that, that there exists like 30 or 40 or 50 in the long term. But I think that in the long term, there'll probably be about like 5 or so. And I want Sonic to be part of this 5. I want Sonic to be as big as possible. And I think we have the opportunity to be as big as possible because I think we have the right team in place on the technical side, on the business side, on the marketing side. We have, I think strong narratives that benefit us, and strong narratives, as I mentioned before, like for example, with theme monetization, that are actually real, they're based on like real technology. They're based on technology that serious people have, been working years on, and that's coming to fruition. It's based on, technology that can like really, really scale. For example, I demonstrated with the existing testing that we launched that we have, hundreds of thousands of people playing these games, and the network is very stable as a whole. And where it's a little bit unstable, say we're like with RPC nodes, we're identifying these issues and fixing them. But on the whole, the network is working really well. So, I just basically want to make the chain as big as possible. And, how many users is that going to be in 5 years, or how many transactions, daily transactions? I don't know, but I hope the number is very, very high.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with this, and I'm sure 100% that you will achieve it. You have all the factors combined needed for this. So great team, great product, a lot of users. So I wish you best of luck once again, and we'll see how the future will go. So we have one last traditional question left. So could you please give a piece of advice to our audience? Especially it might be valuable for maybe your colleagues who are running some projects in Web3, bigger or smaller scale. So what to follow, some life rules, advice of finding stuff, anything?
I'd say like one piece of advice is make sure you choose your team like very, very carefully. In my experience, when you're hiring someone, there's two things that you need to look out for. One is like obviously like do they have the skill set and experience? Right?
I'm just counting these two factors.
Or just like one piece of advice is like having the the skill set and the experience, obviously, in order to in order to do the job, right? Like obviously, like someone has to be technically competent to be able to achieve their job, no matter what it is. If it's a technical role or non-technical role. But the other like very important factor, which is just as important as having the technical qualifications to do your job, is the person's character. Is the person able to work in a team? Is the person able to work ethically? Are they honest with other people? Do they have not a big ego? Are they essentially a team player? Because in my experience, if you don't have both, then the role isn't going to work out for them. Obviously, like if someone doesn't have the knowledge and the experience to do their job, they're not going to be able to do their job. But also, even if the person has a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience, and they're really like competent at their job, if they're not a team player, or if they don't have like a similar set of values as everyone else in the team when it comes to work, then that also doesn't work out as well. I've experienced this in the past where we've hired like really smart people who are very, competent by themselves, but when working in a team, they, cause a lot of issues and a lot of drama. And it has to do with, their personalities clashing and just not really being a team player. So if you can find someone who, is of good character, team player, and is very competent at their job, skill wise, then that's the sort of person that you want to hire and you want to keep long term.
Well, that sounds awesome and very valuable information for the founders and C-levels of projects. Actually, that's it for the day. Michael, thank you very much for joining in. Very insightful, very easy to understand, although there was a lot of information, and I see that you have a lot of things more to share. And I do hope to see you in more episodes, maybe in some panel discussions with other guests from Synopsis. So guys, thumbs up to see Michael in more episodes. And thanks to our viewers for watching us till the end. Stay tuned, guys. Follow advices of our speakers and take care. See you in more episodes. Have a great day, night, whatever is in your region. Bye-bye.